We acknowledge the original owners of the land on which we podcast, whose stories were told for thousands of years. Today, we are recording in Meanjin. We pay our respects to elders past and present who may be listening. Sovereignty was never ceded. A quick note before we get started that there may be some swearing in today's podcast. If you don't like swearing or usually listen with children in the car, you have been warned. Hey, podcast fans. Ready for a podcast event that's as unique as you are? Mark your calendars for February 12th, 2025. The What in the NDIS Now podcast is going live and you're invited. But here's the twist. Our dress code is your favorite outfit, whether that's an Elmo onesie or black tie or an awesome dress with pockets. Anything goes. Here's what's in store. We're doing a mini trade show networking event. We'll have an expert panel discussion. We'll have fun, laughter, and valuable insights. Providers want to stand out? You can sponsor a table for just $300. For that, you'll get your logo displayed behind our panel and advertising leading up to the event. General admission is free, but spaces are limited. Don't miss the chance to connect, learn, and have a blast. To secure your spot or membership, email whatinthendispod@gmail.com or call Hannah. See you there in your fabulous outfits. Hey there, NDIS enthusiasts. Have you been burning to ask me and Sam a question all year? Well, guess what? Your moment has arrived. Yay! That's right. The What in the NDIS Now podcast is wrapping up the year with a bang, and you're the star of the show. We're dedicating our final episode of the year to you and your burning questions about the NDIS. It's time to turn the tables and put me and Sam in the hot seat. Here's how you can join in. Record a voice memo with your question. It's like leaving a voicemail for your favorite podcast. Or if you're feeling a bit shy, shoot us an email. We love reading those too. Send your questions to whatinthendispod@gmail.com. It's that simple. But wait, there's a catch. The clock is ticking. Tick, tick, tick. You've only got until Friday the 13th of December to get your questions in. That's right. Mark your calendars. Set those reminders. Don't miss your chance to get your voice heard on the podcast. Have your questions answered by us. Be part of our end of year celebration. So what are you waiting for? Grab your phone, clear your throat and start recording. Or fire up that email and start typing. Remember, whatinthendispod@gmail.com. Share this with your friends, family, or anyone who's curious about the NDIS. The more questions, the merrier. Let's make the final episode of the year the best one yet. We can't wait to hear from you. This episode of What in the NDIS Now is brought to you by Astalty. Astalty is the software solution for NDIS professionals built by NDIS professionals. Astalty is my go-to software, and Astalty is trusted and loved by hundreds of other NDIS providers. I love how easy it is to use and how it keeps all my participant information, notes, and invoicing all in one place, available to me anytime from any device. Sign up now for your 14-day free trial. Head to astalty.com.au to sign up now. See for yourself how much easier managing all your NDIS business needs are by using Astalty. Thanks again to Astalty for sponsoring today's episode. You're listening to What in the NDIS Now, a podcast where I, Hannah Redford, and my friend Sam Rosenbaum interview participants and providers about all things NDIS. Hi, Sam. How are you going?
Yeah, really good, Hannah. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm super excited today. On the podcast with us, we have Sue Grier. Welcome to the podcast, Sue.
Thanks, Hannah. Hi, Sam. How are you going?
We're going really well, so we've been very excited to try and get you onto the podcast, and we're very happy we've finally been able to do it.
Look, I'm great to be here.
As we usually start the show, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Ashgrove in Brisbane, so I'm a Brizzy girl, Queenslander.
Round the corner from me.
Where are you? Where were you, Sam?
I'm in Ferny Grove.
Oh, okay.
Great little part of the world here in Brizzy.
And you've spent some time in Tassie too.
Yes, so we did a state change and moved down to Tassie just when they were rolling out the NDIS down there. So I was lucky to be part of that rollout. Worked in the sector down there for a little bit. Became homesick, missed my grandkids and my daughters, and moved back to Queensland thinking the NDIS space would be the same in every state because it was a federal initiative rollout, and was pleasantly surprised that Queensland did things different.
Yes. So that brings me to, how did you get into the disability sector?
Okay, so 38 years ago I gave birth to this amazing son who was diagnosed with Down syndrome at birth. So when he was born, it was the era of I actually think it's the same year that they were closing the institutions down in Queensland. So there was a lot of funding and money out there to have people moved out of Woolston Park. William was actually in a program from the age of 3 months. So he's always been in some sort of funding model from that day dot. So, and then I ended up working in the industry. So,
Yeah. As a lot of us do.
I know. And it's really interesting because you can see things from a personal perspective, especially when we work with so many families and participants now, but we also know from a business perspective and compliance perspective of how things need to run, although at the moment things are all a little bit rocky.
Yeah. So now you are a support coordinator and have a support coordination business that is independent.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about how that came to be?
Okay, so I was working for a large Australian support coordination company. I'm not going to name them, but they are a fairly big one. We had a difference of opinion. I left, went out on my own, thought I would just be a independent. You know, it was right on that. We're in COVID, so it was just over 4 years ago, and realised within about a couple of months it wasn't going to be just me. In that time, I think in 2021, we became a registered provider with the NDIS. We've grown to, at the moment, we support about 400 people in Australia with support coordination. So we work alongside a lot of the hospitals here with hospital discharges, work with people with psychosocial, the disabilities are across the board. And I have a team of 13 support coordinators now.
Wow.
And we've got our main offices in Redcliffe now.
Yeah. So that gives you a lot of perspective and insight into what is happening in the sector. And one of the reasons why I particularly wanted you on the podcast is your amazing LinkedIn posts that are so detailed and are often a story of a participant who is being severely let down by the system. And it is often shocking and gripping at the same time.
Yeah.
So I wondered if, you want to talk about some of that and how you don't have to necessarily tell their stories because that's for them, but how you sometimes get through that.
Okay, I think the biggest one we're seeing at the moment is we're seeing people's, in their family situation or their disability or their independence has declined and they're needing more support in the home. So we go through the change of situation, we have all the reports, we the staff ring the call centre and they've just, we get those answers of just use the plan as you need to use. And then...
Which, of course, is the worst advice ever.
We know that, but, when families can no longer support a person at home, we have to increase the supports, or their independence has declined, we have to put more support in place. And then it starts the phone calls. So we have every 2 weeks we ring the NDIS to find out where things are. Can they escalate the change of situation? Where a phone call, and Hannah, you would know from your years in this industry as well, that when we used to ring the NDIS, we could do a phone call in 15 minutes.
Yes.
Now they're taking over an hour.
Yes.
Because, they're still working from two systems, one being Proto, one being PACE. And... we hear this, yes, we'll escalate it. Here's your receipt number for your phone call.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks later, we ring up and, no, it hasn't been escalated.
Yes. Oh, but here's my receipt number. Yeah, they didn't actually push the last button, and so then it wasn't escalated. And you're like, well, if it was just the push of a button, how hard, how did they miss this?
Yeah. But I think the hardest bit is when we get into the stage where there'd be less than $1,000 left in a plan, and we know that person is going to have to do a social admission into hospital, and we hate that. The last thing we want to see is placing a healthy person in a hospital of sick people, taking up a bed space, because we all know ourselves how much Queensland Health is suffering too because of the lack of beds. And then we also don't want to put the stress also on the HLOs that are in the hospital as well, because, then they've got another person with a disability being admitted into hospital that doesn't need to be hospitalised because there's no funds.
And on top of that, a lot of the nurses are not trained in disability because they're trained in sickness, illness, that sort of thing. They're not trained in disability, so they don't understand how to talk to someone with a disability, how to, support them within that hospital structure appropriately. But also we're not allowed to have support workers in the hospital with the person at the same time to relieve that issue.
Yeah, it's sort of, it goes around in that vicious circle. And, I've been lucky, I shouldn't say lucky, but I do have a contact I ring or I text. And you would know in my posts that I always write which hospital.
Yep.
Just so the HLO is aware where they're going.
Yep.
And normally I'll receive a call, or one of my team will receive a call from that HLO in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And then within the next 48 hours, we will have possibly a restart of a plan, which has been, it's been a big relief for families and also the participant, because we don't want them in hospital.
No, but at the same time, you're bashing your head against the brick wall because it was that plan that got them into this in the first place. Actually, we requested a new plan. We actually need a new plan, not just the old plan restarted. But that's something to get us through until you can
catch up and do the change of situation.
And that's if you get the change of situations in before the next rollover or expiry date there.
Yeah.
But the other thing that really frustrates me about all of this, it's really good that you're getting that kind of response. But I remember from back in the days when I was having to advocate and deal with mum in the hospital system within Queensland Health. Why do we have to go to that kind of level to get a response? If it's that easy for people to kind of go, oh, someone's making noise here, why do we have to make noise for them to actually do something?
Yeah. I can't, we shouldn't have to. We shouldn't have to have it where families are at breaking point, or even support coordinators, because, a lot of us have worked with these people, with families and participants for many years. And, we're not just that support coordinator. We're actually part of an amazing network to ensure this person has the right supports. So it sort of becomes a little bit more personal. So, we should never have to go through this. And I've never seen the NDIA in such a bad state at the moment, not even during rollout. Was it ever like this? So it's only been in the last 18 months since we've seen this happen.
Yeah, it's the worst. I keep saying that to people.
Yeah.
That I've been in this a long time too, and I've never ever seen it this bad. And it's really shocking and upsetting. I have a similar thing where a few times I've written letters to federal MPs, and that I've managed to get responses quite quickly, and things have turned around quite quickly doing that. Yeah. And so I've been frustrated even by that, because I'm like, well, you're just lucky that I happen to be, of enough education and that I understand how to write these letters so that the MPs will pay attention, and if you were just with someone else, they might not be as good at that. And it's so frustrating that there's almost a little bit of a lottery in the type of support coordinator you happen to interact with at that point in time, is then also has a significant impact on your outcome. And then, also things like, what do people do who don't have support coordination? They're totally up shit creek in this current circumstance.
Yeah, I mean, and we always talk as a team that, there's only 13, 14 of us, and there are thousands of people that don't have support coordination. What do they do? How do they cope? It would be so hard. And then there's new people still coming into the system or coming into the support coordinators, and they don't have the experience and the knowledge to do this. Because it is hard when, you're dealing with so many different government officials or government officers, especially when you're dealing with Queensland Health. You've got education. There's just so many people involved and systems. It's really hard. So, I've got a team of really experienced support coordinators, and I'm really grateful for the team that we've got. But, even I still learn after all these years because it just changes. Everything it can change weekly in the sector at the moment.
And that's the bit that is the most annoying. And they'll just come up with something as if it was a shower thought, and they blurt it out and you're like, what? And all of us get on them and go, no, you can't do this. And then sometimes they turn around and go, you're right.
Yeah.
Stuff it. We're not doing that. And then sometimes they're like, no, that's what we're doing. And we don't give a shit that you're all unhappy with it. And I mean, that's part of why we have this podcast, is to try and let people know of those changes. But of course, sometimes it does just happen too fast and we can't get episodes out fast enough.
Also the magnitude of information that does come out from time to time, especially now more than ever.
Yeah. And I think too, like the hardest bit is now, we've got the new legislation and there's all these new changes, and the latest one being the art therapy and the music therapy. I work with a lot of people with behavioural problems and intellectual disability, and I've seen the result in, from prior to us linking them into music therapy to where they are today. And we've seen that, the behaviours have decreased and, things are working so much better in the homes, but to now not value the amazing work that these qualified art therapists and music therapists are doing. It's a shame that it's happened what's happened.
It kills me. And I actually called my federal MP actually a couple of times because I didn't get through to start with. I hope that it meant that other people were calling. But eventually when I got through, I was like, you are meant to represent my views to the Parliament. That's why you're there. These are my views. Represent them.
Yeah. And look, I think there's going to be a lot more come out in the next couple of months. I mean, we've seen the STA ruling.
Yes.
I'm not even going to comment on that one, but it's very interesting. This whole thing also around SIL. People need to live with two other people. Well, no, they don't. It's not the norm.
Yeah.
My son is supported in his own unit 24/7 by himself. He chooses not to live with anyone, and that's his choice. But we work alongside his funding budget to ensure that continues.
Yeah, look, that they haven't mandated, but they've said predominantly it will be 1 to 3. That kills me as a human being because I'm like, I'm an adult and I know I don't want to live in a shared house. Why do we just because people have a disability, all of a sudden they have to live in a shared house? I'm like, what the hell?
And look, he's tried living with someone and it was a really negative result. And, when I used to receive phone calls at 10 o'clock at night begging to come home, it's heartbreaking. So we chose that he would live in his own home, and this is his home. It's not a home owned by a provider or anything. This is his home.
Yeah.
And that's how we want it kept.
Yeah.
And look, he has the best life and he does some amazing things, and he's so lucky because he lives up at Redcliffe and he has such a really good network of people around there that, I always believe it. What's the saying? It takes a community to raise a person.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what the Redcliffe community has done with him.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it is. It's a funny part of Brisbane because it is sort of almost like a little country town within the greater Brisbane area.
Yeah.
So that is really lovely.
Yeah. And I think, going back to when they closed our institutions down here in Brisbane, a lot of the ILS homes and all that were in Redcliffe. So people with disabilities have always been accepted by the Redcliffe Peninsula. So
Oh, that's so great. That's something I did not know about.
Yeah, Redcliffe's a very unique and wonderful part of Australia.
Yes.
It's very diverse and very eclectic and, very interesting. Anyone that hasn't been to Redcliffe and can get over there for a day trip, well worth it.
Yeah, definitely.
Are there any other parts of the NDIS that are that you are seeing big holes in?
Equipment, approval of equipment. I think I might have put a post a while ago about a gentleman that I've been working with for quite a few years, an amputee. We put in for his new prosthetics in July. I'm happy to say a new plan came in 2 days ago with it approved.
Goodness.
But, even going through that whole phone calls, where are we with the equipment? Is it urgent? Well, yes, he needs a leg to stand. And some of the questions that we get from the call centre, you know what my magic ball would be that the NDIA actually Bill Shorten provides the agency with funds to educate the people on the call centre.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it annoys me so much that they seem to be the least educated people about the NDIS, and they're the ones meant to answer people's questions.
I could just throw a spanner in that statement and maybe just go stop outsourcing, hire internally and have a training program, because clearly our outsourcing program is not working.
Yeah, definitely. And look, some of the planners as well, I was doing a plan review meeting with a lady I've been supporting, I think, for 6 years. So she has progressive MS and a spinal injury. Amazing woman and a great team working with her. But when we're waiting for equipment and we get this phone call from the planner and he's not addressing her and she's sitting next to me and he's putting all the questions to me and then makes a comment of, I seen you've been using your therapy budget. Has there been an increase in your independence? And I'm there, have you read what her disability is? She has progressive MS. Do you know she's got a spinal injury? My role is to make sure the bit of independence she does have, we keep it. So I think at one stage she used the word, was she getting better? Yeah. So I said, she's actually not going to get better.
No, not ever.
Ever.
Like that's not the way this works. When you were telling the story about the prosthetic leg, I was very nervous because I know sometimes they've asked, well, hasn't it grown back? Like,
I've heard that.
A limb grows back. And you're like, what do you mean? What do you mean?
Did you go to high school biology?
Yeah.
I didn't, and I know the answer to that.
Yeah. Like, I had a participant who has a spinal injury and needed a new shower chair. Like, something relatively simple, but it had to be, it did have to be made for her.
Yeah.
And it took 9 months for the approval to come through. And in the meantime, I kept calling them and I'm like, this is a huge risk because the current one is broken. And it's held together by duct tape and hopes and dreams. And if she was to have a fall because it all of a sudden fell apart while she was sitting on it, like, this is a huge risk. Do something. Yeah. And they'd be like, yes, well, we've escalated it or whatever, and you're like, but that's not enough. I need you to actually approve this thing.
Or we're paying out, or plans are paying out for hire of equipment for months and months. Like my lady with MS, like we got a new plan through just over the last 7 days, but she was hiring a shower commode for $600 a month.
Yeah. Yeah.
when the shower commode is, I think it was $4,500.
Yeah.
You know, what a waste of taxpayer money when, people have been on the scheme for so many years and they know the background, but they're not working quick enough to approve this equipment, and there's just wasted money to hire places.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely done that before, and it's made me want to scream because also it reduces their other budgets to be able to actually do things. I have felt that the way they're making everything harder and harder to do, we are going backwards to the days of coffee and cake.
Yeah.
And it pisses me off that we're going back to that because we tried so hard to get away from that. And, I mean, there are still some people doing it. Yeah. But we've worked so hard to get people's thoughts away from coffee and cake or just go bowling all the flipping time. Bowling is fine a couple of times, but not all the time.
Most of the participants really into bowling league.
Yeah.
Exactly. If you're into bowling, go for your life, but not everyone is that into bowling. And, we're going backwards to those days of just sort of making people with disabilities do the most boring shit possible. And it really makes me so angry watching this happen, and all of the innovation that we've all worked towards just be removed from the system and the scheme as a whole, because nothing innovative now fits in anywhere. It's all on the no list.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a couple of years ago when I had some time to kill before I went to another meeting, and this is talking about coffee and cake a little bit. I had to stop. I stopped at McDonald's, not just to get a coffee, sit down and watch. And when I arrived there, I noticed a person with a disability in a wheelchair and a support worker sitting there. And I had over an hour to kill. And I sat in the row back, and then I looked at the woman and I've gone, I know this woman because she lives in the house I have to go visit. And she was out with her community access provider. And after an hour of watching no communication made by this support worker who was just sitting on her phone texting, I got up to leave and I said hello to the woman in the wheelchair, and then the support worker asked me, did I know this woman? I said yes, and I know where you are from too, and I will be reporting you to your company for sitting here for an hour totally ignoring the person you're supposed to be supporting. And I did end up ringing them. I don't know what became of it, but I think I always tell my team, if you see something like that, you report it. You go up and say something, Don't be afraid to advocate on behalf of that person with the disability, because I think the more times people pull people up, I think we could possibly see a little bit of a change in how these people are supporting.
Yeah.
And generally in the community interaction as well. The amount of times that I hear stories from people on guardianship orders trying to get medication sorted at the pharmacy, and they've got a script from the hospital and they take it into their pharmacy, and the pharmacy goes, no, you need to go speak to your GP because I'm not accepting this script.
Wow.
And then dismissing the individual, going, where's your worker? Because I want to talk to the worker. Why are we dismissing people's intelligence and the ability to engage?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
And that's true. Look, I've worked with a big company that worked with people with spinal injuries, when I first moved back to Queensland, and I sat next to an amazing woman who has a disability, and she had a very big career, and she'd worked for WorkCover and everything like that. But the way professionals treated her outside of her work area was that they treated her that she didn't understand, but her intellect is probably better than mine. So it's amazing that people today still see a person with a disability as not understanding.
Yes.
Yes,
and don't understand that their disability could be purely physical.
Yeah.
And brain is brilliant.
Yeah.
And even if someone does have an intellectual disability, their brain can still be brilliant in a slightly different way that you're not expecting.
Yeah.
And so to just dismiss people is infuriating to me.
Yeah, definitely. And look, we've
It goes back
seen...
to the
Sorry,
Sam.
Sam.
Go on, Sue.
No, you're right.
I was saying that it goes back to that conversation that we were having at the start around the interactions you were having with the hospital and having just to argue for the simplest things.
Yeah.
It's common sense. It just baffles me at the moment why we seem to be pushing on a social front to progress forward, but collectively walking our way backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that encapsulates it exactly.
Don't know what the answer is to change it.
No. I wish I did know.
Yeah. I mean, I always say education. You know, training, education. I mean, like I said before, I learn something new every week in this sector.
Yeah.
But I suppose people just don't understand a lot of people with disabilities, or they don't want to, or they're, you know, are we going back to where people are scared?
Well, that's possibly a good thought, especially with where you think about some of the stuff these days around the whole political correctness conversation.
Yes.
I think a lot of people feel scared that they're about to say something and out of turn and go get cancelled.
Yeah. But do you think also that the media these days are focusing on so much negativity in the NDIS space? Look, we know over time that where there is government money, whether it's Centrelink, NDIS, Medicare, there's always going to be fraud. We know that. But to continue to focus in the media that people on the NDIS are spending money on prostitutes and yoga therapy and all these things.
Don't forget the boats.
And
Or
the boats.
Goat therapy.
Goat therapy is ridiculous.
Yeah, well, you and I went to attended a networking event very recently. And at the end of that event, I was walking home, a bit dismayed, going, let's stop talking about the fraud and more focusing on the fake.
Yeah. And there's a lot of fake.
Oh, there's so much fake. And there's the weird thing is the amount of peers in the industry that we have that don't necessarily seem to see it.
Yeah. And...
or don't want to call it out.
No. I mean, I think you all know me well enough. I'll call it out. I don't have a problem.
I love you, Sue.
Sometimes my mouth gets me into trouble. But, you know, I've been in the disability sector for too long, and in this space at the moment, you know, we are seeing some things happening that I don't like, and I'll call a provider or a person out on that. I don't have an issue. And neither will my team. My team will call the person out.
I'm really excited that your wisdom is flowing out to a new generation of support coordinators. And this new generation of support coordinators are like you, going to call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
And that is so comforting to me as someone who has jumped ship.
It's a hard space. It is. There's over, I can't even remember when I started doing support coordination when I was in Tassie. Only a little bit. That's when the price guide was 16 pages.
Yes.
And then it moved to 37. I don't even know how many pages it is these days. But there's days where I just think, I can't do this anymore. But something will happen that will be a positive, and I go, yes, this is the reason I'm doing this. And this is why.
Speaking of positive notes, I really do love the throw out on your positivity. I think yours and Nina Crumpton's from down in New South Wales, Newcastle space area, both continually call out the shit, but purposely go out of the way to praise the good news as well.
Yeah.
And I think there needs to be more of the latter.
Oh, yeah. We see such amazing things happening, and, I try and talk to the team when I can, what's the positive for this week? What's something positive that's come out of it? The positive this week, I've got a gentleman that's got his prosthetics approved. I've got a woman that's got a new plan with all her equipment approved. They're really big wins, because just for those two, that equipment is going to make such a big difference in both their lives.
Awesome. I love that so much. So that brings me to, in your ideal world, what would the future of the NDIS look like?
That people were funded correctly. Stop thinking that everyone on the scheme they're ripping off the taxpayer, because there's a lot that don't. There's a tiny, tiny little bit that may be, and like I said, it's government money. You're always going to have fraud where there's government money. That we had staff that work in the industry in there for the right reason. I always said, even prior to the NDIS, there's no money in the NDIS. There's no money in disability. If you're in it for the money, you may as well leave, because if you're doing the job right, there's no money. I'm not swimming in jewels or flashy cars or big houses.
Or boats.
One thing I do is I hope I provide a good work environment for my team. And that's something I always wanted to do, was to ensure that my team are happy with the company they work for. So I invest more education into my team and provide them with vehicles to use. So we're not passing on cost to participants around all that, because we all know in this industry, mileage is a big thing.
Oh, my goodness. It does my head in.
So
I personally am of the opinion that you either pick time or you pick mileage. Yeah. The fact that you can charge both,
I know,
kills me. And I have never, ever charged both. I charge time. Yeah. That is it. And every time I see people who charge both, I'm just like, no, stop it.
And I think one thing I want to say to any of the support coordinators listening to this podcast is put a value on your time. If you're getting new participants with support coordination in and they've provided you with I've read where some people have had 6 hours of support coordination for the year. Knock it back. That's disgusting.
Yeah.
If it's 6 hours, then it needs to go back to the LAC.
Yeah.
They can work with the families, because value your time. Yous play such an important role in supporting people on the scheme. Push it back to the local area coordinators if the funding is absolutely shocking, because I'll tell you what, they actually get paid more than what we do and we do a more thorough job.
Yeah. That bit pisses me off the most. Recently, my eldest daughter's, I had to put in a change of situation, and it finally got to the point where it got to the LAC. And as she was talking, I played dumb and I said, but I need a support coordinator, because will I be able to call you? Will I be able to email you? And she said, oh, no. And I was like, and I really need someone who can come out to my house and talk me through things. And she's like, oh, well, we can't come out to your house. And I said, so how come support coordinators can, because she said, it's too big a risk for us. And so we never go out to people's houses because that's too big a risk. And I said, but support coordinators do that all the time. And she said, yeah, but we're more important.
Really?
And I was like, I'm sorry, what?
Really not surprised by that.
And the other thing that she said that I really poorly put on LinkedIn was, I was saying that my daughter needs support workers to teach her independence, through everyday things and all the time, because she needs it modelled 1,000,000 times, not just like 5. And the LAC said to me, oh, no, that's not what support workers are for. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Of course that's what support workers are for. And she said, no, that's what allied health assistants are for. And I said, but then they can only come out like once a week. And I'm talking about your everyday sort of things. And she said, no, support workers aren't there for capacity building. They're there just to get you through life, for like showering and eating and stuff. And I said, but it would be a waste of, it's not value for money to send out an allied health assistant when a support worker is cheaper.
Yep.
And she said, oh, well, I guess we'll see what the planner says.
Wow.
And so now I'm still waiting, and then I said, oh, well, how long until I get to speak to the planner? And she said, oh, well, they're backed up at the moment. It could be 3 or 4 months.
But you know what? That's another thing I hate at the moment is when you ring up and they say, oh, we've got a backlog and we're really busy. And you know what? If I ran my support coordination company like that, I'm pretty sure I would lose my registration.
Right. And that's another thing that pisses me off, because I'm like, yeah, if any other company said what they are saying and doing, they'd be out of business.
Yeah. And look, I think there's been a few times that we've got so angry over that. We've reported them to Quality and Safeguards, and we get the email back to say, we can't investigate the NDIA. But why not?
Yeah. Then who?
Who do we report them to?
Commonwealth Ombudsman.
Okay. Are they going to do anything, Sam?
I am not in a position to comment on the successfulness of that ombudsman.
Okay. Look, I know when things get really tough.
If you look at similar ICAC investigations in previous years from state-based levels, they give you a good picture.
Okay. And, I know my team work with a few federal members who actually really do what their role is, especially because our office is based in Redcliffe. We have a really good federal member up there that actually will support NDIS participants and will make those phone calls, and his team does work really hard. And, there's a couple around the Logan that do exactly the same.
That's awesome.
So we just need them in every area.
Yeah, right?
100% there.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
You're very welcome. I've enjoyed it.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Huzzah!
Thank you for listening. Please share with people you know. Until next time, as the Green Brothers say, don't forget to be awesome.